Alright, today I have for you the next installment in Epic History TV's Napoleon series, Napoleon Smashes Prussia, the Battle of Jena in 1806. I'm doing the entirety of the series, piece by piece, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I know it's very popular, so let's just dive right in.
An Epic History TV History March collaboration, supported by our sponsor, the Great Courses Plus. In December 1805, at the Battle of Austerlitz, Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of the French, won a crushing victory against the joint forces of Austria and Russia. Napoleon now dominated Europe, able to hand out spoils as he saw fit. In February 1806, he sent an army led by Marshal Massena to overthrow the King of Naples, who had dared to side with his enemies, and gave his throne to his own brother Joseph instead. Another brother, Louis, was made King of Holland. His German allies, Bavaria and Württemberg, were elevated to the status of kingdoms, while Napoleon made himself protector of the Confederation of the Rhine, a new alliance of German states that would contribute 60,000 troops to his army. In recognition of the new reality, Emperor Francis of Austria formally dissolved the Holy Roman Empire, founded by Charlemagne 1,000 years before, but now without influence or purpose. Austria had been humiliated. France remained at war with Britain, Sweden and Russia. But in the summer of 1806, all eyes were on Prussia. The Prussian king, Frederick William III, regarded Napoleon with deep mistrust and had been about to join the coalition against him when news arrived of its disastrous defeat at Austerlitz. He was heavily influenced by his wife, the celebrated and popular Queen Louise, who detested France and Napoleon. She led the influential War Party at the Prussian court. Matters came to a head over Hanover, a German state which had belonged to British King George III, been occupied by the French, and given by Napoleon to Prussia as compensation for other territorial changes. Now the Prussians learned that Napoleon had secretly offered to give Hanover back to Britain in exchange for peace. Frederick's advisors now persuaded him that war was the only honourable course. But Prussia then made a basic strategic blunder, sending an ultimatum to Napoleon without consulting its new allies in the Fourth Coalition. Their forces were too far away to help Prussia, who would now face Napoleon's Grande Armée with just the small state of Saxony for support. In 1806, the Prussian army had a fearsome reputation that dated back 50 years to the reign of Frederick the Great. Napoleon, a student of history, regarded it with respect. But Prussia's army had been allowed to rest on its laurels. Its generals were old, its staff work hindered by bureaucracy and personal rivalries, its movements ponderous and predictable. Prussian soldiers, however, could be relied on to fight with pride and determination, while Prussian cavalry was regarded as amongst the best in Europe. In October 1806, Napoleon invaded Saxony with an army of 166,000 men and 256 guns. Advancing in 3 columns, the French crossed the mountain forests of the Thüringer Wald, along roads carefully reconnoitred by scouts and spies. Napoleon intended to threaten Leipzig and force a decisive battle with the Prussian army, which he believed was near Gera. The Prussians were, in fact, further west, concentrating near Erfurt, on the west bank of the river Saale. Its commander, the Duke of Brunswick, had hoped to threaten the flank of Napoleon's advance. But wrong-footed by the speed of the French, he now ordered a retreat north to find a new defensive line. On the 10th of October, at Saalfeld, Marshal Lannes' 5 Corps clashed with a Prussian advance guard commanded by Prince Louis Frederick, the king's cousin. The Prussian force was routed, and Prince Louis himself killed in combat with the quartermaster of the French 10th Hussars. 3 days later, Lannes made contact with a large Prussian force near Jena and sent news to Napoleon. The French Emperor, believing he'd found the main Prussian army, rapidly issued orders for his corps to concentrate for battle at Jena. Bernadotte's 1 Corps and Davout's 3 Corps were to cross the Saale and fall on the Prussian flank from the north. But Napoleon was wrong. Lannes faced a 35,000-strong Prussian rearguard, commanded by General Hohenlohe. The main Prussian army, 52,000 men under the Duke of Brunswick, was further north, moving straight into the path of Davout's 3 Corps. The Battle of Jena began at 6:30 AM on the 14th of October, in thick fog. Marshal Lannes' 5 Corps already had a toehold on the plateau west of the town and river. His first task was to drive back the Prussians and win room for the rest of the French army, arriving by the hour to deploy. His infantry led the way, and fierce fighting broke out for the villages of Cospeda, Closewitz and Lützeroda. Meanwhile, Augereau's 7 Corps advanced through a ravine, emerging onto the plateau on Lannes' left flank, while Soult's 4 Corps climbed steep tracks to form on his right. Napoleon joined Lannes in the centre of the battlefield, organising a 25-gun battery to support the attack on Vierzehnheiligen. The village was won, but then lost to a determined Prussian counterattack. On the right, around 10 AM, Soult's infantry secured Closewitz, but was counterattacked on its right flank near Rödigen. A decisive charge by Soult's light cavalry drove off the Prussians, routing their infantry and capturing 2 enemy colours. As 6 Corps began to arrive on the plateau, its fearless but impetuous commander, Marshal Ney, ignored orders and dived into the fighting around Vierzehnheiligen, becoming briefly cut off by a Prussian counterattack and having to be rescued by Guard cavalry. General Hohenlohe was expecting the arrival of 15,000 more troops under General Ruchel at any moment. Until then, he remained largely inactive, shoring up his line and ordering limited counterattacks. But he had run out of time. Napoleon had begun the day with just 25,000 men. By 12:30, a steady stream of reinforcements had brought his strength up to 96,000. As the Emperor rode past the Imperial Guard, one young soldier, eager to be sent into action, called out, "Forward!" Napoleon stopped and demanded to know who had spoken, then rebuked the soldier as a beardless youth who ought not to offer advice until he too had commanded in 30 battles. But the moment had arrived. Although the Guard, to its frustration, remained in reserve, the other French corps were ordered forward in a general attack. The Prussian army began to give ground. At first it kept its discipline, but then disintegrated into a general rout. Murat's cavalry were launched in pursuit, riding down and sabring hundreds of fleeing Prussians. General Ruchel's 2 divisions finally arrived, at the worst possible moment. They briefly held up 5 Corps' advance, but were soon outflanked, broken up by cannon fire, and charged down by French cuirassiers. Meanwhile, 12 miles to the north, near Auerstadt, Marshal Davout was marching southwest, expecting to fall on the Prussian left wing at Jena. Instead, he encountered the Duke of Brunswick's main Prussian army, heading north to take up new positions. Davout's 3 Corps, 27,000 men and 48 guns, was about to face odds of 2 to 1. While Bernadotte's 1 Corps, which had orders to support Davout, was nowhere to be seen. Davout, nicknamed the Iron Marshal, showed no signs of alarm. He formed his 1st Division into a defensive line centered on the village of Hassenhausen, his infantry forming squares to repel a series of cavalry charges by General Blücher's advance guard. His other 2 infantry divisions arrived to strengthen the line, standing firm in the face of repeated Prussian attacks. But Prussian movements were slow and poorly coordinated, nor did they use their numerical advantage to try and outflank Davout. At a crucial moment, the Duke of Brunswick was shot through the eyes, a wound that proved fatal. King Frederick William himself took command. Several Prussian units remained uncommitted, but the king, convinced he faced the main French army under Napoleon, dithered. Around 12:15, Marshal Davout counterattacked. The Prussian army turned and fled. Davout had won a stunning victory against the odds, but at a heavy price. His corps suffered 25% casualties, 1 man in 4 killed or wounded, while inflicting twice as many losses on the Prussians. When news reached Napoleon that Marshal Davout had engaged and defeated the main Prussian army, he reacted first with disbelief, then heaped praise upon the Iron Marshal, later awarding him the title Duke of Auerstadt. Marshal Bernadotte, in contrast, was nearly court-martialed for failing to support Davout. Napoleon's army began a masterful pursuit of the beaten Prussians, giving them no time to regather their strength. 2 weeks after the twin battles of Jena-Auerstadt, Napoleon's troops, led by Davout's heroic 3 Corps, entered Berlin. The next day, General Hohenlohe surrendered at Prenzlau. At Lübeck, General Blücher and 20,000 Prussians were driven out of the city in heavy fighting and forced to surrender, while 25,000 Prussians besieged at Magdeburg surrendered to Marshal Ney. Prussia's army had been devastated by a Napoleonic blitzkrieg. In just 33 days, Prussia had lost 20,000 dead, 140,000 prisoners, 800 guns, and 250 standards. It was a humiliation that proud Prussians like General Blücher would neither forget nor forgive. Unlike Saxony, King Frederick William refused to make peace with Napoleon. He continued to hold out in East Prussia, trusting in the approaching Russian armies to rescue his kingdom. Despite another glorious victory for Napoleon and the Grande Armée, the war was not won yet. Napoleon Bonaparte was one of the greatest...
Yeah, so I'm just start off with saying how much I like these videos. Just the graphics, the maps, and everything moving around is very captivating, as well as being informative and interesting. I kind of get lost in it a little bit, but yeah. So this was a very important battle for Napoleon and for Prussia, because it really takes Prussia out of the fight. Even though Frederick, refused to surrender and Napoleon ended up going on battle Prussia some more, the main fight is taken out of Prussia. Prussia is pretty much out of the picture by this point. So the big thing about this battle is that it really shows once again Napoleon's strategies, and everyone is seeing Napoleon's strategies out in the open, and yet again they are unable to counter them. Now, they haven't really had the time to analyze everything, but they are still sticking to the tried and true methods, and as a result are being beaten by Napoleon's superior strategies. Napoleon, I like the fact that they chose the word blitzkrieg there, because Napoleon did sort of use that style of warfare. It's very fast moving, it's very organized, usually using small elite divisions instead of large armies. Very fast, hard hitting, going after weak points, so a lot of flanking maneuvers, a lot of finding the weaknesses in the armor and going in from there. It's usually how Napoleon did it. He was very, very aggressive, very, very fast. One of the things to come out of this and the other battles involving Prussia was Clausewitz, who was Karl von Clausewitz, who was an officer at this time for the Prussian army. He goes on to write On War, his book, which is a book on military theory, on how war should be conducted. And in it, he talks a lot about using fast, rapid warfare, small divisions, specially designed elite divisions, having different sections that do different things. So not having your entire army designed to do one thing, splitting it up, having different kinds of divisions for different kinds of things, which is all things that Napoleon was doing to some extent. Clausewitz also argues for very fast, rapid warfare. He argues for highly organized warfare. He argues for highly aggressive warfare, which a lot of it wasn't what Napoleon was doing. He was very fast, rapid, aggressive, and the other thing Napoleon was doing so well is that he was fighting in I don't want to use the word total war, because it wasn't total war, but he was fighting in a method that was similar to total war, in the fact that he was using everything he had militarily. He went in after Saxony and Prussia with everything that he had. He didn't go in there half-assed. He went in there with everything that he had. And so when finally facing down the Prussian army, he's able to pour in reinforcements much faster than they can. So even though he found them different spots than expected, he was wrong about where they were. He was still able to make the situation in his benefit, because now he was able to bring troops in where he needed them. And the defeat of the Prussians is a huge deal, because as they talk about, the Prussian soldiers were amazingly well trained. They were some of the best ones in Europe. They had been for 50 years, and they continued to be, all the way up through the First World War. Even then, once again, the Second World War, some of the best troops in Europe. This Prussian militarism. But Napoleon's forces were able to beat them back and actually get them to break ranks and be routed, which is not something that the Prussians did very much. It would take a lot, and it really just comes down to, again, Napoleon's strategies, but now we talk about organizational strategies and the training of his military. So he came in with this rapid form of warfare, and he built his army around that, and he trained his army around that. So his soldiers are very well trained, very professional. They are on par with the Prussians. But Napoleon's using strategies now that the Prussians are not ready for, that they do not know how to fight. And that is where the breakdown happens. The other major part that factors into this is the Prussian High Command was a mess. It was an absolute mess. At this point, you had 3 chiefs of staff for the Prussian military. A number of positions were held by multiple people. You do see the beginning. Now, this is something that doesn't happen very much in Prussian military history, but you do see the nobility within the military, and not nobility that join the military, but people in command who shouldn't be. So that was an issue. Now, they are obviously trained as much as other officers, but they have not earned their rank the way the officers have. And so to be a high-ranking officer in a Prussian army would normally have been a very big deal, but these guys did not earn those ranks, and they were not effective leaders in comparison to the other Prussian leadership. But getting to the very top, the Prussian leadership was terrible. These generals were old, and they hadn't really fought that much in a long time. So their strategies and tactics and doctrines had not caught up at the time. They were probably some of the least capable people in dealing with Napoleon's new doctrines of warfare, because these guys were old and very much in the tried and true. It really broke down the Prussians, because under the right command, Prussia would have stood a better chance against Napoleon. They never would have beaten them because of the sheer numbers, and Napoleon would still have been a superior strategist. But had they been under strong command from the top down, then they would have stood much better chances, no doubt in my mind. But yeah, and this is sort of the last time this happens, because after this, Prussia and later Germany, the German Empire, doesn't face actual invasion again until World War II. And even then, it's a really, really hard fight, because if World War I, even though lost, they were never actually invaded, they were never occupied. Germany it was just a really, really bad peace treaty. But yeah. So one of the things that come out of this that's very important is, well, there's actually 2 things come out of this that are very important. The first thing I wanted to say was that this really shows off Napoleon's strategy, what he's going to do for the rest of Napoleonic wars, how he's going to fight. This gives everyone the assurance that this is what Napoleon does, that Austerlitz was not a once-off thing, that he's not going to change strategies when he gets to different parts of Europe. He's going to keep doing the same kind of thing. And this is where they start to really see what Napoleon is doing differently, and try to adapt to that, and if possible, even try to incorporate it. And on that note, the second part is that a lot of very important officers are in the Prussian military at this time. They're not very high ranking, most of them, but they are up there, and they are commanding officers. One of the most influential is Karl von Clausewitz, who, as said, goes on to write on war. And his experiences in the war basically lay the groundwork for what he's going to write. And he writes this on war, and it's as I talked about, it's the talks about very rapid warfare and almost a total war mentality, the breakdown of units, and I really highly suggest reading it if you're interested in military theory at all. If you really, I mean, because it plays into so much. It plays into from the Napoleonic Wars, because it's kind of a mirror of the Napoleonic Wars in a way, but it also is the backbone, and it becomes the backbone of German military doctrine up through the end of World War II. This Clausewitzian doctrine of being aggressive, of using specialized units, of using small elite units, breaking your army down into smaller pieces, being more effective on the battlefield that way. So rapid warfare, using numbers strategically instead of relying on huge numbers, using the numbers you have strategically, and of this almost total war-like method of going all in. Your state is not in total war, but using your military in its fullest, not using bits and pieces, using the military in its fullest when you engage the enemy. A lot of what Clausewitz talks about, and that's really what Prussia does. They design their military around that doctrine of rapid warfare and all of that, which we see go on, and we see it in the Franco-Austrian War and the Franco-Prussian War, World War I. It doesn't work as well on the Western Front, but Eastern Front it definitely shows up. And World War II with the Blitzkrieg. The Blitzkrieg was sort of the, some have said the perfection of Clausewitzian theory. Was the most modern, and you really don't get much more Clausewitz in the Blitzkrieg, which is why I kind of found it interesting to use a choice of words there for Napoleonic Blitzkrieg, because the Blitzkrieg does come from Clausewitz's theories and with the changes of technology and everything, instead of using tanks and everything like that. It was just perfect. It was perfect timing. It was a perfect storm of using Clausewitzian theory, especially since in Nazi Germany, the old Prussian militarism and German pride were very, very high, and having someone like Clausewitz being this, to them, legendary, and really in my mind even legendary military theorist, being a German was just a huge deal. So everything was very much based around Clausewitz, much more so than even the rest of Germany. And Germany had been following Clausewitz ideals basically ever since they were adopted, not long after the Napoleonic Wars. He writes the book. Many of the old officers are retiring or dying, and the younger officers start taking over, and they start reading Clausewitz, and they say, yeah, this is exactly what we need to do. This is right. They really agree with him on most respects. So yeah, Clausewitz's book is very, very influential, and it comes from not just this battle, but all the battles that Prussia would fight, in Prussia fighting a number of wars even after the country itself was subjugated. Yeah, so I really do love these videos. This battle is incredibly important, and as I said, it really showcased Napoleon's strategies, because even when he was wrong, he still wins. He was wrong about where the army was, and twice actually he was wrong about they were further west than he thought. And when he got there, he thought he was engaging the main army when he was not. So he made those mistakes, and yet his strategies, his soldiering, his training of his officers all came out, and he was able to win, despite the fact that he was actually putting himself in a strategically inferior position, and not on purpose this time. Unlike Austerlitz, this was not a trap. He actually made a mistake, but he makes up for that mistake by being the superior tactician, by having superior troops, and by having superior officers. And that all the issues that Prussia had came out here. Every problem that Prussia had militarily came out here. They were all brought to light here. And it was after Napoleon, Prussia, like I said, never really lets this happen again. It was very, very humiliating, very, very imprinting onto Prussian military thought. this battle and the battles that Prussia would fight against Napoleon. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end the video there. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe. If you have other videos you want me to check out, whether it's history, alternative history, put them in the comment section. I'll be sure to check them out. I will be doing more of these Napoleon series. Like I said, I'm going to do the entirety of the series, so go ahead and subscribe. I will be doing the rest of these. I'm also going to do the Russia one. I have already done the Russian Revolution, so I'll post a link for that up there that you can check out. And definitely check out my previous videos on this, because I will be doing the entirety of them in the near future. Like I said, I'm going to end the video there. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.